What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I will be talking about my favorite exotic armor pieces for each class. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time now, and I figured now was a good chance to. These aren't necessarily the best exotics for the chosen class, but I just want to give a history on these armor pieces and why they have a special place in my heart. With the final shape approaching, I thought it would be fun to take a trip down memory lane and reflect on some awesome moments I've had with these exotics. So let's start on my main class of Warlock. While I do play and love all the classes, Warlock is what I mained in D1, and it's the type of character I most gravitate towards in other games. Think Sorcerer in Diablo, or a Wizard, or the Storm in Anthem. You get it, I like spellcaster classes. Anyways, my favorite exotic on Warlock has to be Controverse Hold. I've used these extensively over the years ever since they came out. I've soloed GMs with them, they are always on my character for day 1 raids, and I even abused them in Crucible to earn Not Forgotten for the first time. Shout out to my homies Zach and Taylor for carrying my ass to 5500 back then. I did my best to hold my own with the Lonesome Sidearm, my Twilight Oath, and of course, my busted as hell Controverse Hold with handheld Supernova. Sadly, I don't have clips from back then as I was on PS4 at the time, but I would use them to bait players in and get lots of double kills. I think the season I got 5500 was the season Shadowkeep launched, so Oppressive Darkness was also on the artifact, so if I didn't get a kill, they were weakened and easy cleanup for my Lonesome Sidearm. And this was back in the day when PvP and PvE shared sandboxes. So now weaken is only like 7.5% in PvP, but back then it was 30%. So these things were a monster. I soloed my first ever Nightfall with them as well, doing the Lake of Shadows on Master difficulty. I used a different cheese spot than people use today, but yeah, I was thrilled when I first beat that. And I also used it to solo flawless the 0 hour mission, which is the first video I ever uploaded to this channel. And like I said, to this day, it is usually what I go into a day 1 raid with. Raids usually start with some ad clear, and this build is wonderful for ad clear. The Void 3.0 changes gave them a glow up as well, allowing us to get Chaos Accelerant combined with Devour, so you have huge uptime on your grenades. And the grenades can weaken with Echo of Undermining, allowing them to hit very hard. And you can even get volatile rounds for your weapons if you run Echo of Instability. So while this build has always been excellent, it is pretty much in the best place it's ever been right now. And I know some people have been saying the grenade energy return was nerfed, but there is just an internal cooldown on the grenade return now. But if you run Echo of Remnants and hit your grenade on a high health target that can withstand the damage the whole time before dying, then you can still get 2 procs of the perk from Controverse Hold. A little tip for you from a Controverse main who knows these exotics inside and out. So yeah, that is why I love this exotic. It's been by my side to help me accomplish feat after feat in my earlier days of D2, so they really hold a special place in my heart. Just an all-around awesome exotic for pretty much all content in the game. Up next, we'll go with Hunter, and for me, my favorite exotic is 6 Coyote. It is so simple. Gain a second dodge charge, but this second dodge charge has so much utility. Back in the day, I used this to solo flawless a Prophecy dungeon for my first time, and I still love that emblem. I was on Void Hunter, and I think the tree with multi-shot tether. Basically, you would use your smoke to go invis, which would give you Heart of the Pack, but then you ran Gambler's Dodge to get your smoke back. Back then, this tree didn't have the invis dodge, so you didn't have as much invis uptime as you do today, but you would do the smoke invis, and then you could dodge near an enemy to get your smoke back. And then, because you had 2 dodges, you could do this again. And I think the smoke invis lasted slightly longer than the dodge invis. So this was basically the Omni Oculus play loop before Omni was in the game, and it was extremely strong. Like I said, it got me my first solo flawless Prophecy, so it was really good in solo flawless dungeons at the time. The first solo flawless dungeon I ever did was Pit of Heresy, and I used the same play loop for most of the dungeon, but I did throw on Arcstaff and Assassin's Cowl for the Chamber of Suffering. But for the maze part, getting by the ogres, the invis was invaluable at the time. I know that dungeon is pretty much a joke now, but back then it was pretty difficult and the invis came in super clutch. I then also used this exotic to solo flawless the Shattered Throne after I did Pit of Heresy. So my first 3 solo flawless dungeons all came with me abusing invis with 6 Coyote. I often say invis is the training wheels for Destiny players, and I mean it. I used it back in the day to get better, and I truly think it would help anyone get better at soloing content. You can't get better if you don't push yourself, but having invis is a great way to get out of a jam and not die. So it helps you to learn those situations, so then in the future when you improve, you learn how to avoid being in those situations entirely. So fast forward to today, I do still love this exotic. I've used it to get a solo flawless card in trials by abusing it on Strand with the Ensnaring Slam and Threaded Spectre, and I've even used it in solo Grandmasters. In GMs, using the Threaded Spectre as bait is very effective, and this gives you 2 of them, so you have really good uptime. There are more use cases for 6 Coyote to be sure, but in the current sandbox, I find it most valuable on Strand. You can also use it to dump ammo in a DPS phase with Marksman Dodge, and I loved it with Heart Shadow for a quick dodge to go invis, and then use the Heart Shadow weaken shot. There's so many use cases. For such a simple exotic, it is super versatile, and that is why I love it. And up next, we have the King of Titan exotics, the Synthoceps. If you watch my 10 best Titan exotics video, you will know that Synthoceps reigned supreme on my list, but it is not just because they're my favorite Titan exotic. I do genuinely believe they are the strongest Titan exotic. So to take you down memory lane again, I used to be in a PvP clan back in the Forsaken days. It was called Loud, and we had some absolutely cracked gamers. We would 6-stack in PvP with my in real life friends and my gamer friends, and we would basically compete for kills. We were all fairly decent, but the best player was definitely Loud. The kid was cracked, and he mained Synthoceps Titan. I was still a pretty big noob back in the Forsaken days, so I didn't know what makes exotics good or bad, and he explained how the lunge range was super clutch, and then he would run Bottom Tree Sunbreaker, which I believe is the one that made the Sunspots. I don't remember if Sunspots healed you at the time, but I know for damn sure that they gave you a damage bonus, because I would go on to follow in my mentor's footsteps and rock Bottom Tree Sunbreaker. I would sometimes use Phoenix Cradle as well for a longer damage boost from the Sunspots and to give my teammates Sunspots, and when Loreley Splendor Helm came out broken as shit, I would use that too. But the main thing I would use was Synthoceps, and that extra lunge range it granted was so ingrained into my playstyle that after Bungie recently nerfed Synthoceps and decreased that extra lunge range, I'm always whiffing my melees in PvE to this day. I know the distance where my melee should connect, but then I forget that I don't get that extra distance anymore. Muscle memory is a hell of a thing, let me tell you. I still main Synthos to this day, and yet I'm still not used to that melee lunge change. And speaking of changes to this exotic, they have seen many over the years. Back in the day, they worked with 1-2 punch, which when combined with Roaring Flames and Bonk Hammer could 1 or 2 shot Gambit bosses. It was insane. So now the Bonk Hammer no longer works with 1-2 punch. But even without it, it does still stack with Roaring Flames, and the damage increase used to be 200% or 3x more damage, but now it's been nerfed to 165% more melee damage, and you only do 100% more glaive damage. But I'm pretty sure when glaives came out with Witch Queen, it was still 200% more damage on that as well. And I mentioned the increased lunge range, that got taken away, and in its place, Bungie made it so you get increased handling and reload speed when surrounded by enemies. And you still get the 50% increase to your super damage, which is actually unreal. It can allow Behemoth Titan to solo Riven, and it makes your solar supers hit very hard, especially if you are rocking Roaring Flames. And it makes the already great Strand super even better. It hits like a truck, plus your grapple melees do insane damage. The interactions it has on Strand is actually pretty broken. So broken in fact that I've been calling for a nerf for a while now. Meanwhile, people are out here speedrunning GMs with it in around 5 minutes. It's very strong. But I hope they leave Synthos as is, because the issue is more with Strand grapple melees than anything else. So Synthos have seen a lot of iterations over the years, and I think despite their strength, they're in a pretty balanced spot right now. Bonkhammer also had to get a nerf because you could just spam it over and over with Synthos, and it was one of the best DPS options you could use, and it cost you basically no ammo. So yeah, we have seen many different versions, and I myself have made 3 different build videos on the different solar versions over the years. Because as things change, I like to update the changes because I think Solar Syntho Titan is the best pound for pound general play build in the game. It is good at so many different things, from survivability to damage output, that it can shine in basically all levels of content if you know how to build into it. And I don't really use them in PvP anymore since the lunge range change. I now rock Dune Marchers, but in PvE, you can usually catch me on Solar Titan, especially for a day 1 solo dungeon, because I just find it the easiest thing to use. And one other fun fact about the old Loud clan, a bunch of them all changed their original PSN name to have the word "it's" in front of it. So my buddy Steamop became It's Steam, Loud was It's Loud, and my name, I never changed it at the time when I was on PlayStation, but in the summer of 2020 I decided to move to PC and start a YouTube channel, and the old Loud boys inspired the name for my YouTube channel when I went to make it. And now I go by It's Tizzle. So big shout out to the old clan. I miss those days of 6 stacking in the Crucible, doing the fun triumphs like only get kills with trace rifles, running around with rat kings, or when we all went Well of Radiance and we were one-shotting people with Le Monarchs. The game was so much more weapon focused than ability focused back then, and I loved it. That being said, I've really enjoyed hardware lately as well. It's been so fun to get back to gunplay and PvP. Anyways, thanks for indulging me while I talk about the good old days in Destiny 2. And that is going to do it for my favorite exotic armor pieces on each class. Absolutely love these exotics, and they've all been in the game since Forsaken, which I think is really cool. They've had a meaningful place in so many different sandboxes over the lifespan of Destiny 2, and I think that is super awesome. Just timeless exotics that I will always love. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite exotics are and why. I love many exotics in D2, but these ones are just simply above the rest for me. If you are still watching, then thanks so much for watching to the end. It means a lot. Also, like and subscribe as it helps the channel. Thanks again, and take care.